Berio, I showed him a piece of 12-tone music that I had written, because in those days, I'm talking 62, I probably had written it in 1960, but I was still at Juilliard. What I had done was, my way of dealing with the 12-tone row was, you can invert the row so that what goes up goes down, or you can retrograde the row so that the beginning becomes the end, or you can retrograde and invert the row, and I did none of those. I just repeated the row over and over and over again. Berio looked through the score, and he looked at me and he said, if you want to write tonal music, why don't you write tonal music? I said, that's what I'm trying to do. He was working on, or he had just finished, Omaggio a Joyce. What's Omaggio a Joyce? It's a tape piece with his then wife, Kathy Barbarian, reading fragments of Finnegan's Wake, all cut up, so you get kind of, that phonemes, sometimes catching a whole word. Very well done, because Berio was an extremely talented composer. And then he said, okay, I want to play you 2 recordings of Caroline Schnapphaus. I said to myself, Gesang die Jungen. Now, Gesang die Jungen means the voice of the young man. And the reason that piece worked in my ear was because of the voice of this kid. The reason that I found what Berio was doing with Omaggio a Joyce was interesting was because he was using the human voice as a source. I worked on very funky home tape recorders. Let's see, I had 2 Wallensack tape recorders. There were 2 brands. There was Revere, which was an American name, and then Wallensack was the German company, I guess, in the original. I had a couple of those, which were little monophonic tape recorders with a built-in speaker. And then later I got a Sony stereo machine, which was really a big deal. And before that I had a Viking. But all this was home equipment, very, very lo-fi. And on that equipment was It's Gonna Rain and Come Out done. But what I got out of it was, don't tell me you don't have the right equipment. You've got an old Mac Plus, which I did different trainings on. It doesn't matter. What matters is your musical imagination and your ideas and how well you execute those ideas. Starting with music from Alanet's Voices as an Organ, and much more so music for 18 musicians, I said, well, what if I did something which is quite normal in the West, turning attention, in other words, instead of the normal reference being Africa or Bali, what if the normal reference was, Western music in general, and particularly, let's say, French, well, I wasn't thinking consciously. Later on, I began to realize a lot of things I was doing were coming out of Debussy and Ravel. But at the time, I think it was just, well, what if I just, had a series of chords to start this piece? And I guess I don't know whether I sat down at the piano first and improvised the chords, or whether I was thinking I ought to do this, but I did. And the first thing that got written was this series of chords, without a bass line. And I remember Les Scott came from a show and he had a bass clarinet. And he said, gee, couldn't you write a bass line for me? It was very provocative. Normally when you're voicing a chord, you think of chorales. You sing the chord or you play the chord and it has a certain, quarter note, half note, whole note, whatever, several whole notes. I got the idea, I wanted to have a pulsing chorale. In other words, the notes would be repeated over and over again and then go on to the next chord and then go on to the next chord, but always keeping this pulse going. So this was articulated because I, again, got the interest in saying, well, what if it wasn't just percussion and it wasn't just piano? What if it got in winds or strings, or let the voices do something a little bit different? Because I'd had voices in drumming. So there were 2 basic measurements in Music for 18 for how to measure these pulses. One of them is by pulse. Somebody plays on-beat marimba, somebody plays off-beat marimba. There's something magic about somebody playing on the beat and somebody playing completely off the beat. That lifts the ensemble in a way. It adds up to the same thing, but it doesn't feel like the same thing. The other kind of time is however many pulses a bass clarinet or two bass clarinets and singers for that matter can sing comfortably on one breath. So the bass clarinet player and plays as many pulses as he or she can. And pauses and does it again, and then picks up their instrument in a kind of soft edge cue and says, okay, moves slowly down, giving cue to everybody else, we move on to the next chord. Now, how can it be that he's moving down slowly and you don't know which eighth note to change on? Well, answer is that the chords all work as suspensions, meaning that the notes in chord 1 will be consonant in chord 2, so if you change a little bit later, it's okay. As a matter of fact, it's kind of interesting. After a sort of parting of the ways, when I got out of school, and the latter part of his life, starting in the 90s, he was no longer with Catholic Bavarian. He came to hear music for 18 musicians played in the Reich Hall of the Radio Hall in Torino, and really liked it, and we remained friends from there until his death. So on a personal level and on a musical level, he was a teacher.